Karatepiloi, it's Octo, and there's a lot that a contemporary audience can learn from Aristophanes' Assemblywomen or Ekklesiazousai. This play is about women seizing political power in the 4th century Athens and legislating equality. This is one of my favorite comedies ever written because of its absurdity. Despite the craziness, it shows how the ideals of democracy, gender, and justice can collapse under what is seen as logic and reason. Aristophanes forces us to ask, what happens when liberation becomes law and equality becomes compulsion? And maybe more disturbingly, what if that's exactly what Athenian democracy, or maybe democracy as a whole, looks like? Before we dive into the play, let's learn a little bit about the author. Aristophanes was born around 446 BCE in Athens, although his exact birthplace is unknown, and he died around 386 BCE. Aristophanes, often called the father of comedy or the prince of ancient comedy, was among the earliest full-time playwrights and leading figure in old comedy. His influence extends to various modern media, including shows like South Park. However, much like South Park, Aristophanes was not infallible, especially with WMDs. Despite his writing being as good as it is, only 11 pages out of the estimated 40 to 45 survived. Some of his most notable works include The Knights, The Clouds, The Wasps, The Birds, Lysistrata, The Frogs, and of course, The Assemblywomen. The unusual titles of these plays are derived from their respective choruses. He was known for blending political satire, slapstick, parody, music, and sharp social commentary. Moreover, these issues were highly relevant to Athenian democracy, and Aristophanes always picked the most fiery topic he could. Some examples are politicians, philosophers, especially Socrates because he was the most annoying, war policies, and the Athenian democracy itself. So if you want a good understanding of Athenian comedy, you need to have a good understanding of the Athenian political climate as well. If Aristophanes was alive today, he would probably be making fun of somebody like Charlie Kirk being assassinated. You know, Chuck, you lived by a lack of gun control and you died by it too, so I guess you're like Achilles in that way. Aristophanes' legacy is in his plays. His plays remain a vital source of understanding for Athenian society, politics, and the evolution of comedy. As the father of comedy, it would probably be worthwhile to explain what ancient Greek comedy was and how it evolved. So, like any good classicist, I will start by telling you what Aristophanes' comedy is not. It's not a sitcom. In Athens, plays were performed in large open-air theaters as part of the civic and religious festivals called the Dionysia for tragedies and the Lenaia for comedies. Thousands of citizens gathered to watch, and the plays were part of competitions, just like tragedies. However, a key distinction was that the Dionysia invited foreigners, while the Lenaia did not. Consequently, the Lenaia often featured more overt themes. This was because it was an internal affair, and there was no concern about the potential shame comedies might bring if non-citizens, with the exception of medics of course, were present. A medic was a free, non-citizen resident of Athens, often an immigrant or foreign-born Greek. Medics could live, work, and pay taxes in the city, but they lacked political rights such as voting or holding office. They were required to register with a citizen sponsor and pay special residence tax, called a medoikion. Though excluded from citizenship, many played important roles in the Athenian trade, industry, and culture. The reason why it's important that only insiders attended the Athenian Lenaia was because ancient Greece was a shame culture, not a blame culture. This means that the negative actions were only considered real if they were discovered, not unlike some politicians today. I'm just saying, if I were clean, I would have just released the files. 508 and 507 BCE, Cleisthenes reforms. Cleisthenes reorganizes Athenian citizens into new tribes and establishes the framework of democracy, emphasizing the participation of ordinary male citizens in the ecclesia, or the assembly. In the 5th century BCE, it's the height of democracy. The assembly and the Council of 500, called the Boule, run Athens. Magistrates chosen by lot, juries drawn from citizens, direct participation is the norm. Thousands of citizens could attend debates and votes. The Periclean era, mid-5th century. Payment for jury, service, and other civic duties expands participation. Athens builds its empire through the Delian League, fueling both prosperity and political strain. The Delian League was a military allegiance formed in 478 BCE, led by Athens, and originally based on the island of Delos, to defend the Greek cities against Persia. Member states contributed ships or money to a common treasury, and over time Athens took control of the League's funds, moved the treasury to Athens, and used the resources to build its navy, monuments, and empire. What began as a cooperative defense pact gradually became the foundation of Athenian imperialism, with subject states paying tribute while Athens dominated the alliance. The Peloponnesian War happened in 431 to 404 BCE. This was a long conflict with Sparta that destabilized Athens. Internal divisions and financial strains erode confidence in democracy. The Peloponnesian War was a protracted conflict between Athens and its empire, and Sparta with the Peloponnesian League. It stemmed from Athens' growing power through the Delian League and its dominance over other Greek states, which threatened Sparta and its allies. The war dragged on for nearly 3 decades, marked by sieges, shifting alliances, and devastating plagues. Athens was ultimately defeated, its empire dismantled, and democracy briefly replaced by an oligarchy. The conflict exposed the dangers of the imperial overreach and left Athens politically fractured and financially weakened, setting the stage for disillusionment reflected in Aristophanes' Assemblywomen. In 411 BCE, there was an oligarchic coup. The 400 briefly overthrew democracy during wartime crisis, restored soon after though. In 404 BCE, the defeat and the 30 tyrants. Athens loses the war. Sparta reinstalls brutal oligarchic regime called the 30, which lasts less than a year before democracy is restored in 403 BCE. In the early 4th century BCE, democracy is restored, but it's fragile. The trauma of war, economic hardship, and repeated coups leave Athenians wary of corruption and instability. Political life is dominated by lawsuits, demagogues, and debates about reform. In 391, Assemblywomen performed. Against this backdrop of disillusionment, Aristophanes imagines women seizing control of the assembly to fix the city with reforms that are both idealistic and absurd. When discussing women in ancient Greek politics, it's essential to highlight ancient Athens' most womanly politician, Alcibiades. A charismatic, yet controversial figure, Alcibiades was an Athenian general, statesman, and orator. His adversaries often argued that his captivating beauty made him unfit for power because of his sexual life. Indeed, his charm was undeniable, extending even to his flaws such as a lisp. As Plutarch says in Lives, he was also renowned for his sexual prowess, a trait that, in ancient Greece, could elevate one's social status. Hooking up with older men used to get you places, and he simply had better butt stuff than other people. Much like in contemporary society, many people believe that gay relationships are a sign of weakness, especially when being penetrated. His exceptional skill in this regard further bolstered his influence, much to the chagrin of his political rivals. A student and sometimes lover of Socrates, Alcibiades was known for his ambition, charm, and shifting political allegiances. He was a key proponent of the Sicilian expedition, yet he faced accusations of religious impiety, specifically for the mutilation of the Herms and the profanation of the Eleusinian mysteries. His career was marked by defection, first to Sparta, then to Persia, before eventually returning to Athens, embodying the political intrigue, ambition, and fragile trust prevalent in late 5th century Athens. So now that we have a general idea of who this is, let's talk about the mutilation of the Herms because it's funny and also probably contributed to Athens' greatest military failure. The Herms were semi-iconic statues of Hermes, characterized by a bearded head and an erect phallus. They served as protective markers throughout Athens, gracing homes and public spaces. In 415 BCE, on the eve of the Sicilian expedition, a citywide scandal erupted when most of Athens' Herms were vandalized. Their faces were defaced and their phalloi likely damaged. This act was immediately perceived as impious and ominous, sparking fears of divine retribution and concerns that it could jeopardize the impending expedition. Suspicion quickly fell upon the saboteurs, possibly Spartan sympathizers or internal enemies, the enemies from within. Alcibiades, one of the Athenian generals for the Sicilian expedition with ties to Sparta, was implicated in the broader profanation of the Eleusinian mysteries. Despite his denials and offer to stand trial, his enemies exploited his absence with the fleet to have him charged and condemned him in absentia. A citywide inquiry ensued, with witnesses like Andocides implicating members of drinking clubs called heterii, rather than definitively proving Alcibiades' guilt. The desecration of the sacred Herms trapped into deep-seated religious and civic anxieties, a sentiment echoed in Aristophanes' Lysistrata, which references the Herm choppers. But this is for another video. Ironically, they lost their best phallus by condemning Alcibiades. Despite the panic, political tension, and suspicion the event caused, Alcibiades' career continued. He famously defected to Sparta, then to Persia, and eventually returned to Athens. The Herm scandal vividly illustrates the intricate connections between religion, politics, and public perception in Athens, and how accusations of impiety could be wielded as potent political weapons. The protagonist of the play, Praxagora, recognizes how there are all these different external factors that can affect your speech in the assembly, and it's super funny seeing how she applies the lessons from this event to her own play. If you've not read the play yet, this is where I would pause the video and start reading because I'm about to spoil the entire play. Go on. Get out of here. One of the most important aspects of the Assemblywomen is the layered gender performance at work. On stage, you have a male actor playing a female character who is herself pretending to be a man in order to sneak into the assembly. It's a form of physical comedy by way of disguise within a disguise. For an Athenian audience, this may have been striking, but not super uncommon because women have been portrayed by men for a long time since Athenian women were not permitted to be actors. In my opinion, it leaves the contemporary audience with the question of what was more jarring? Seeing a man impersonating a woman, or a woman played by a man impersonating a man? But don't forget about men playing men dressed as women. However Aristophanes intended, the effect is playful and subversive. In modern terms, yes, you could also call this drag. The play begins with Praxagora, an Athenian woman played by a man married to Athens' most corrupt politician, Blepyrus, gathering her friends. Their plan is to disguise themselves as men and infiltrate the assembly. Each friend then delivers a speech attempting to persuade the assembly to transfer power to the woman. Praxagora comically critiques each speech as they maintain their male disguises. At the assembly, she delivers a persuasive speech that convinces the citizens to hand political power over to women. And once in charge, Praxagora introduces radical reforms, abolishing private property, pooling wealth and possession, and establishing communal meals and shared living spaces. These subjects would have resonated strongly with the Athenian audience, likely anticipating upcoming votes. Even sexual relationships are regulated. Young men must first sleep with older women before enjoying the company of the young and the attractive. Back at home, her husband Blepyrus and the other men are bewildered by the sudden changes, torn between relief at being freed from political duties and frustration with the new communal laws. The reforms quickly lead to cosmic chaos. Greedy neighbors resist sharing, selfish men try to cheat the system, and old women chase down reluctant young lovers under the new sexual rules. The play ends with the promise of the grand communal banquet as Blepyrus and others head off to feast, while the chorus celebrates the abundance and absurdity of the new order. Now let's just go over some of the jokes I really like. So what are men supposed to look like? Ego ge proton men, gekotas maskalas, lakmes dasuteras kataper en xunkemenon, epapot aner eis agoron oiketamu, alepsamene ta som holan dihemeras, ekrenamen etos aproston helion. I for one have shaggy hair, shaggier than a bush, just as was agreed. Then as my man was going into the agora, I was feeling myself, oiling my body all day, standing in the sun. Aristophanes starts right away with gender parody. A male actor plays a woman pretending to be a man, a triple layer of performance. Although this may seem mundane, it shows that men are expected to be hairy and to be masculine. It's also super ambiguous about what's happening all day, the touching yourself or the standing in the sun. The syntax says anointing oneself, but logically you'd think that she would be standing in the sun to tan for a long period of time. Women just can't stop carding or making clothes. Ne tain artemen. Ego ge tigar an keron akroimen. Ara. Xainusa gumna desti muta paidia. By Artemis me! Why should I listen to ill counsels as I'm weaving? My children are naked. I just think this enjambment really stood out to me. You would not expect the next word to be carding in the assembly, but the extra little time between the lines really solidifies the joke. In my mind, there are two possibilities for how this joke played out. There are some women who do genuinely want to card wool, but they should not be confined to such a literary trope in real life. They should be given the opportunities to do whatever they want most. The second way of thinking about this is that although the woman is in the assembly, she is still burdened by female gender roles by necessity. Swearing by Aphrodite. Woman 1. Ne tain aproditein euge tautagileges, talein aproditein homosas. By Aphrodite, you said these things really well. Praxagora. Why do you swear by Aphrodite, bitch? I mean, fuck, you'd never catch me swearing to Apollo. If only there was some innovation that could save humanity. Hos desin, hemon tus tropos beltiones. Ego didaxo prota men, gar taria baptusi termoi kataton archaion nomon. Arpaxasai, kuki meta koromenas, idois an autas, e dautenaion, poles, e tuta Christos ekein uk an, esozeta, emeti kainon ala peri ergadzeta. I will teach that they are better than us, the Athenians, in character. First, because they wash wool altogether in hot water, according to the ancient custom. You might never see them change their ways. And the city of the Athenians, if it did this usefully, would be saved. If only it weren't wasting labor on some other new thing. By the way, kainon, this new thing, is also the name of the current court system in Athens. Although this is an apolitical channel, Assemblywomen is directly engaging with the reality of Athenian imperialism. At the time, Athens was relying on the Delian League, essentially an empire in disguise, constantly demanding more money and manpower to keep expanding. And as happens with all empires, control over subject states began to slip, especially as they weren't seeing great military results. The Athenian response was always the same: more military force. And funding real projects at home is, if that sounds familiar, it should. Think about how the United States frames peace efforts today, like sending thousands of missiles to Israel with the hope that somehow this will magically bring peace. Just a few thousand more, and then I'm sure Bibi would change his ways. We need to help the people of Athens. So this quote is from the first chorus, where the women are going over their plan for the assembly. Hapos de symbolon, labantes epeta plesioi, kata dumetos, an keratamenomen, hapan apasan de tas hemeteras pilas, kaitoi, ti lego, pilus gar, crane, monomadzain. It's such a manner, after taking our ticket, let us neighbors sit down so that we may stretch out our hands. For everything and anything our girlfriends deem necessary. And what am I saying? I mean male friends. For which it was more fitting to say. I just like the play on the genders. The chorus is also in on the bit that they are just barely hiding that they are women. Blepyrus is constipation, around 315. The pair in the ass at 354, 355. Kago epedon, apapateso, nundamu, akras tis, enkleisas eke tasitia. Me too, needs to find a coat. When I will have shitted, but now, some pair has been enclosed in me and has provisions. If only there was some way to both clear his bowels and sexually satisfy him at the same time. If you know, you know, and if you don't, you can stimulate your prostate to force a bowel movement. Ancient feminization is crazy with this joke. Some crossdresser is out in the street crying about the pain in their ass. It may be a little homophobic by contemporary standards, but you have to know to get it. So I think it gets the pass. There's a Nicias shout-out in 427. This is the political enemy of Alcibiades, and the reason for the failure of the Sicilian expedition. Meta tuta toinon, epitrepes neanias, lucas tis, apope des hamoias Niciae, demagoreson, apecoresen legain, hos cre paradunai, tais gunaixi tain poli, et etorubesan, kakragon hos eulegoi, toi scuta mikon, pletos hoi dekton agron, ane borutsan. After this, therefore, some pale, pretty-faced young man jumped up, orating just like Nicias. He attempted to say that it's necessary to give over the city to the women. The group of shoemakers applauded and cried aloud that he speaks well, but those from the countryside groaned loudly. Kind of a backhanded compliment to Nicias. On the one hand, Aristophanes is calling Nicias beautiful and stuff, but he's also saying that Nicias talks in the assembly like a woman, or at least presents himself like a woman. The underlying joke is also that Nicias is much better suited for the Pnyx than leading troops. It's also just a good time to explain why being pale is considered feminine. In ancient Greek society, it was thought that men should be tan because they're always outside working the fields. Women, however, stayed in the house all the time, or at least were expected to because of gender roles at the time favored women staying in the house. Anyways, it was expected for women to be pale because they are modest and they don't go outside. It shows that the man is strong enough to survive on his work alone and not forcing his wife to plow the fields. She has time to do womanly things like weaving and spinning. In reality, skin tone has nothing to do with how masculine or feminine you are, unless you're orange, in which case, you're the most masculine of all. Blepyrus can just go home and fart now that women are in charge, 464. This is from a conversation between Blepyrus and Cremes, his neighbor. Ma di ala tais gunaixi tautede mele. Su dastenacti per dominos, oikoi menes. By Zeus! But these are already affairs for the women to do. However, you, without a groan, stay in the house breaking wind. This reversal's great. The men are finally free to sit at home and do nothing. This joke also hints at male laziness, what many Athenians believe to be driving the city into disarray. Communism in 600. There's an almost perfect communist utopia in this play because of the women in Praxagora specifically. This is the Socratic dialogue where Blepyrus mimics Socrates and Praxagora is the interlocutor. Unlike in normal Platonic dialogues, this interlocutor is actually way smarter than Socrates himself and has a good retort or solution for everything that Blepyrus complains about or criticizes. Most people do not realize how much of an overabundance of food there is most of the time. The issue since the agricultural revolution has not been that there has not been enough food in developed countries, but that certain people have much better access to it than others. Hoarding wealth has always been an issue for all of history. Udes, uden, peniae, dorase panta, gar exusin hapantes. Artus temake madzas, klainas oinan stepanus erabintus, hosta ti kerdas me katatenai sugar exuron apodexon. Nobody in poverty will do anything, for everyone will have everything: bread, fish slices, barley cakes, clothes, wine, crowns, chickpeas, a bunch of accusatives of respect. So what would he gain from not putting it in? For you, knowing well, point away, break apart according to logic, which is like stronger form of eureka. Women and men have to have sex with ugly men first. Make men subjected to the same conditions that women are subjected to. Alla pulaxus hoi, paulateroi tus callius apiontas, apatu depnu kai teresus epi tois demasiuisen, kuc exestai para toisi calois, kai tois megalois catadarten, taisi gunexi prin an tois aiscrois, kai tois microis carisontai. But the uglier ones will guard the prettiest as they go away from dinner, and they will guard over this democracy. And the laws should say that it's not possible for the beautiful and the big to spend the night with women before the ugly and the small. Aristophanes exaggerates the idea of equality. Everyone should be equal to a ridiculous extreme, even in the bed. It's the erotic version of redistributive justice. No sex with the rich until you've given some to the poor. This is a reversal of gender norms. In classical Athens, women's sexuality was much more controlled than in contemporary settings. Here, there are ones enforcing sexual regulations on men. The phrasing mimics official Athenian legal language, turning a bedroom rule into something that sounds like a civic decree. Guarding over democracy. Epi toisen demosioisen. It sounds bizarrely bureaucratic for something so carnal. Aristophanes skewers both democratic idealism and sexual politics, showing how absurd perfect equality becomes when applied literally. The joke also plays on the tension between desire and law. What's natural versus what's mandated. Inheritance concerns. 638 to 640. Ukun agrux eu kai Christos, exes ton panta geronta diaten agnoion epe kai nun, gignoscantes pateranta, ancusi, ti det hotan agnos hai, post hu tate capi kesuntai. Therefore they will strangle well and dutifully all the old people, one after another, because of ignorance of who is their father, when even now, knowing who their father is, they strangle. What is certain, when he is unknowing of his father, how then will they not shit on us old people? This is Blepyrus's reaction to Praxagora's plan for communal families and children. If nobody knows whose child is whose, he fears that his sons will strangle his fathers, or worse, do it without knowing who their father is, like Oedipus. This is dark humor based on patriarchal paranoia. As a contemporary reader, we have to recognize that this was a pre-Maury society. You can never really truly know who the father of your child is, unless you're the woman, or at least there's the anxiety of that. So there's this masculine obsession with lineage, which Aristophanes is mocking, but Blepyrus has a genuine fear of this happening, like many men of the time. Without a clear lineage, because of an illegitimate child, there's no inheritance, there's no citizenship, because both are determined through the father. It threatens both the house and the state. It shows the fragility of a social order built entirely on paternal certainty in a time where you never really know. The easiest solution to this is just not have it based on lineage, just as Praxagora suggests. Although a little radical, she wants to make children common, which shows how arbitrary the current system is. The hierarchy is gone, the problem seemingly disappears, there's also this Oedipal fear of being killed by your son. The easiest solution to this is just be a good dad and maybe your son won't want to kill you. Forcing a man to obey the law and subjecting him to the conditions women face. 945. Oimodzon arane dias podeses ugar tapi carixenes tadestin. Kata ta naman tauta poien, esti dikaion e democrat tu meta. Even if you scream by Zeus, you will fuck, for these are not the laws of Carixenes. It is just according to the law to do these things, and if we are to live democratically, that is. This scene comes near the end of the Assemblywomen, where the utopian reforms have been put in place. The equality under the law now includes sexual equality for men and women, in a pretty funny and absurd way. This young man is legally required to have sex with the older, uglier woman before he can sleep with the beautiful one. Here, a woman is forcing him to comply by order of the law. The phrase kata ta naman, according to law, is chillingly bureaucratic. Aristophanes flips the rhetoric of justice and democracy on its head, and what happens when equality itself becomes coercive. The old woman's democracy sounds like tyranny, a direct parody of how Athenian law could be weaponized. Rape fantasy as social inversion. The scene plays as a farce, but it's deeply uncomfortable, a rape fantasy trope played for laughs. The gender roles are inverted, but the underlying violence stays the same. Aristophanes is pushing the logic of his utopia to its breaking point. If women rule the city, do they simply reproduce male abuses in reverse? Mythological parallels. This moment echoes Pentheus and the Maenads in Euripides' Bacchae. Pentheus, who bans Dionysian worship, for its sexual deviance, is literally torn apart by ecstatic women, famously including his mother, Agave. His ritual act of tearing people apart limb by limb is called sparagmos. Aristophanes plays on that same fear, the man consumed by female power. It also recalls Orpheus, another man ripped apart by women after rejecting all of them. In Greek myth, women are either sexually frenzied or sexually denied, and there's no real middle ground. Here, Aristophanes collapses these two extremes into one absurd law, a democracy of desire turned violent, moral and political reading. Beneath the slapstick and a political jab, the Athenian ideal of equality can become monstrous when taken literally. If democracy means everyone gets what they want, someone eventually gets forced into something. The law that was supposed to liberate ends up mirroring oppression. A very Aristophanic punchline. Kaire, thank you so much for watching, and if you made it this far, don't forget to like and subscribe. It really helps me keep making videos like this. I spend a lot of time researching, translating, and editing to bring these ancient Greek texts to life, so every time you like, it's genuinely making a difference. If you enjoyed exploring the Assemblywomen and want to see more deep dives into Greek literature, language, and philosophy, check out my other videos on Sappho and on ancient idioms. Or leave a comment if there is a play or fragment you'd like me to cover next. And most importantly, remember, be positive and be yourself. Peace.